7 ways that you can get in front of seniors and sell more Medicare supplements this AEP. Help us save the Supps. So another part of this too is, you're talking about time versus capital, right? A lot of times there's also a trust factor as well. So, if it's a referral, as an example, right, that is going to have no costs associated to it. Your time is going to be involved, not necessarily in the prospecting, but in following up, setting an appointment, presenting to them. And the trust factor is really high. So obviously a referral checks kind of all those boxes, right? Your time is kind of at a minimum, the cost is low, and the trust is high. So obviously referrals are a fantastic way of getting in front of more seniors. So let's start with the first one here. Again, you can find in the book. This is from chapter 3. Going door to door, which for Medicare Advantage you are not allowed to do, but for Medicare Supplement you can go door to door. So I want to make that clear as well, because I know some of you might hear that and be like, you can't do that. And you're right, you can't do that for Medicare Advantage, but for Medicare Supplement, you are able to go door to door if that's something you would want to do. So again, trust factor, you're a stranger showing up at a senior's door, it's going to be low, right? They don't know who you are. You show up. Sorry, you guys, hang on one second. Show up at their house, right? You're knocking on their door. You're a total stranger. They don't know who you are. Trust is going to be very low. So, part of a good door-to-door salesman, what they're trying to accomplish is they're trying to build that trust very quickly at the door. Cost is low, right? It's really just your time. That's the cost here. You don't have to spend a bunch of money to go out and knock doors. You can even do it locally. You don't even have to spend a lot of your gas money. One thing, again, a tip, as someone who's done door-to-door sales for many years, you could try to get a targeted list of seniors. Obviously, if you're knocking on someone's door who's 30, 40, 50 years old and they're not even Medicare eligible, you're really wasting your time, right? So one thing that you could do is get a targeted list of seniors, people who are over 65, and then you're not spending much money, but you're also saving some of your time. But again, you're spending more time than if you were to actually be working an appointment or working a lead. But if you don't have the funds, if you're brand new, this could be a way of cutting your teeth. I don't think it's a horrible way of selling insurance if you're brand new. Obviously, if you're brand new and you have no sales experience, you don't want to lose marketing dollars by buying leads or working leads that you don't even know how to work, right? So while I'm not saying this is something I would recommend, there is a situation where it might make sense for you as an agent. So let's move on to our next one here. Cold calling. Again, this is something that's not allowed for Medicare Advantage, but technically, yes, you can cold call for MedSup the way you could cold door knock for Medicare Supplement. There's obviously lots of TCPA rules. If this is the avenue you're going down, it's very difficult, I'll tell you that, to cold call these days between, all the TCPA rules federally, the state TCPA rules, the DNC list that you have to adhere to. Then you have stir shake protocol. So that's essentially the government trying to work with the carriers to eliminate spam calls, because people don't want to be inundated with calls from people they don't know. So, cold calling is probably at an all-time high for difficulty. And again, you have low trust, but also low cost. So in my mind, cold door knocking, cold calling, it really falls into that same category, same vein. You're spending a lot of your time. You are not spending any money or very little money, and the trust is low. So it's going to be an uphill battle, right? And this, Christian's talked about how he cold called for MedSup for many years. That was one of his main ways of getting started. And so I think for Christian, if he was here, he'd probably explain that it was a good way of getting started and kind of training and getting used to talking to seniors, right? A lot of experience can be gained from cold calling, but not necessarily something that you would want to do, right? So moving on. Call verified, aka telemarketed leads. So obviously this is something that I'm a huge fan of. At Lead Heroes, we've developed a system where you can take a lead that was generated online, 1 to 90 days old, and it goes through our call verification system. So a live person talks to them, confirms that they are still interested and they want to speak to an agent, a specialist, and then you actually get that lead exclusively sent to you. So the leads aren't shared, and you know that they'll answer their phone. This is one of the things, when you're knocking on a door or you're cold calling, you have no idea if anyone is even on the other side. The strength of a call verified lead is that someone answered the phone and just talked to someone at our team within the last 24 hours, 48 hours. It's usually a very, very, very fast turnaround. So there's a cost to it, right? So you're paying for a service, you're paying for leads. So there's, again, looking at the scale of these different items here, the trust, the cost, and your time. Your time, though, starts to go down, your time investment, because now you have a higher level of efficiency of getting more seniors on the phone. However, your cost is going to go up, right? Cold calling, cold door knocking, really no cost involved or very little cost. The trust factor is going to be a little higher, but again, it's still just a lead. It's not a warm referral. It's not like, hey, their neighbor said they've been working with you and they want you to call them. This is still someone that's, responding to generic marketing, and they don't necessarily know who you are, but they just said they wanted more information. So there's some level of interest. So the trust is a little bit up because they're expecting someone to contact them, but you still have to work to build that trust very quickly. Next up, direct mail leads. This one is near and dear to my heart. Direct mail leads, I worked for many, many years as an agent when I first got started in the business. And many of you still work direct mail leads to this day. I think there is, again, depending on the agent and the agency, there's a place for direct mail leads. I think from a marketing portfolio of diversification, which maybe I'll kind of wrap this into my final thoughts when I get through these 7, but I think there's almost a place for direct mail in everyone's marketing portfolio. Maybe it's not the number one thing you're doing. Maybe it's just a secondary or a smaller piece of your marketing budget that you're spending on direct mail. But I think it can be impactful to have. And there's a certain demographic, I think, out there that likes to still use the mail. I think it's shrank quite a bit. Anyone who does direct mail will tell you returns have been down year over year for the past 5-6 years. So that's something to keep in mind. Back in the day when I first got started, you could do a Medicare Supplement mailer and you might get 3 to 5% consistently. Now, any type of Medicare Supplement mailer you send out, you're probably lucky to get 1 to 2%. So it's probably gone down by 50-60% over the past 10 years. And that's not an exaggeration. I'm giving you some round numbers, some estimates just based on the data that I've seen personally. But that would be my guess, is that direct mail's probably gone down by about 50 to 60%, depending on the area. Some areas might still have a decent response rate. Other areas might even be worse than that. But just keep that in mind. Cost, here's the thing with mail. The cost is very high. I do think the trust factor is higher than potentially a call verified lead. The problem, though, and this is one thing I've always pointed to with direct mail compared to a call verified lead. If you're working with a mail house, which most of you aren't doing the mail yourself. Some of you might be doing the mail yourself, so that's a different story. But I'd say the vast majority of agents are working with a mail house that's actually doing all the mail. And so what happens, the way the direct mail process works, the mail house takes your lead order, whether you're paying for per 1,000 letters getting dropped, you're paying per lead. Those letters go out. The seniors get them over the course of 1 to 2 weeks. depending on the mail, right? It's usually not the fastest delivery because you're trying to save money on postage. Also depends on, are they getting a letter or a postcard? So there's some variables here, but the lead house takes your order. It takes 1 to 2 weeks for that mail to get to everybody. Now, over the next 1 to 2 weeks after that, the mail starts to go back to the mail house, right? It's usually to a PO box. And then what happens is they get that letter back or they get that postcard back, and they're going to scan it or forward it to you, the agent. So at the fastest, best case scenario, you're looking at maybe 2 weeks. On the slow end, which happens more often than you'd believe, it could take 4 weeks. And I'm talking about from the time you place that order. But here's the other problem is by the time that senior actually read it and filled it out, goes to the mail, drops it in the mail house gets it, forwards it to you, scans it to you. It could be 2 weeks or more. And what do you think the senior is going to remember what they filled out 2 weeks ago? A lot of these seniors don't, or they're either filling out so many mailers, they don't remember the mailer they sent back that indicates wanting to talk to you, or alternatively, they're just forgetful. So that to me has always been problematic with mailing seniors. Is it's slow? And I think it's relatively forgetful unless you have something really creative you're doing, or if you're doing the mail yourself, you might be able to see something a little differently. But a lot of the generic mail that I've seen, that I've worked with agents on, that Lead Heroes, still works with agents on when we're calling to set appointments, because we still do thousands of appointments every day. We're setting appointments. So we'll call in direct mail leads for people. And that's the type of data that we've seen. So take that into consideration when you're looking at your options, right? Especially for Medicare Supplement. High cost, trust factors decent. So, there's a decent level of intent there. And your time will come down because the intent is higher. But your cost, a lot of times it doesn't make sense. If your cost per lead gets to $30, $40, $50, and it takes you 5 or 6 leads to generate a client, now you're looking at cost per acquisition that's potentially $300-$400, right? It can really start to get away from you. So I think call verified leads typically yield a lower CPA, especially for Med Supp, and that quicker turnaround I think is a huge win. So that's number 4. So we'll keep cranking here. Internet leads. So this one's kind of a broad topic, right? There's lots of different internet leads. Similar to direct mail, you might have your own website. You might have your own Facebook ads. There's all sorts of ways of generating leads. You could do it online. You could do it through YouTube, through Google. So there's kind of a scale here with internet leads. A generic shared internet lead is typically garbage. I'll tell you that. And some vendors might be better than others, but if you're getting a shared internet lead where the opt-in, they weren't even really that interested to begin with, and then that lead got sold 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times, by the time you're calling that senior back, they don't want to talk about their Medicare Supplement plan. I'll tell you that. They are just angry and upset that you're calling them. So, we saw a lot of that. Now I think, instead of these like shared 100 times, we're seeing a lot of these low cost social media generated internet leads. And here's, I'll kind of give you my feedback on the social media generated internet leads. It's honestly not a bad lead from a quality standpoint. Again, we're talking about these 3 categories with each lead type we're going through here. We've got time, trust, and cost. So over the past few years, we've seen the cost come down. Part of that is Facebook's gotten better, Meta's gotten better, some of these other internet platforms, they've gotten better at delivering your ad to the right audience, getting them to engage. But the other thing that's come down with that cost per lead is typically the response rate. So you might be able to get a quality lead at $10 or $15. We'll just throw out there as an example. I mean, some people I've seen, they love to share their clickbaity, hey, check out my cost per lead. You know, it's $5 per lead, $6 per lead. And other people I know, they're spending $20, $30, $40 per lead. The cost per lead is almost irrelevant because, again, how many can you actually get a hold of as an agent? And how many of the ones you got a hold of are you actually able to close, right? Which is why cost per lead, while it might sound attractive if you're, you know, talking to a marketing company or you're getting pitched from a lead vendor, I get it. We talk about cost per lead all the time at Lead Heroes. But the reality is your CPA, your cost per acquisition, that's the number you need to know. And that's the most important number. So what I think has happened is the internet marketing through these social media companies, they've kind of gamified the system where they can capture people's information really easily. So let's say you have a MedSup internet ad through Facebook. You know, so you're running Facebook ads, you're trying to get Medicare supplements, you know, people to give you your information so you can contact them about MedSup, whether it's a third-party vendor or you're doing it yourself. Let's say you're paying, you know, $15 to get one of those leads. Well, historically, from what I've seen on the contact rate, you might only get 1 out of 5 to pick up the phone. And that's where it gets dicey. So, you know, you hear that $15 per lead cost and you're like, damn, that's actually pretty low. This is great. You know, I if I can get 1 out of 10, close 1 out of 10, I'm going to be crushing it on my CPA, right? That's $150 CPA on a MedSub client with a lifetime client value of, you know, $1,000, $2,000. So problem is if you're only getting 20% to pick up the phone, the chances of you closing 10% of the overall leads is almost impossible, right? Because that would mean you're closing 50% of the people you talk to. You get 10 leads, you only talk to 2 of them, and then you have to close every other lead you're talking to. And again, historically, that's not the type of data or feedback that I've seen from agents. You know, it might be kind of like a 20% kind of rule where you're only getting 20% on the phone, then you're only closing 20% of the people you talk to. So, you know, that would mean you need to talk to 5 people and it would take you 50 leads. So, you know, sorry, it'd be 35 because 10 to talk to 2, 10 to talk to 2, 25. So 25 leads. So in that example, again, 25 leads to close 1 person. And again, just using kind of made up round numbers here at $15 per lead, that's $375 per acquisition. That's the type of math that I think a lot of agents can get caught up in. You know, you hear that $15 cost per lead and you think, oh, I'm going to crush it. This is great. Then all of a sudden it took you 25 leads to generate 1 sale, where maybe a different lead that had a similar cost, you get a higher contact rate, and now your CPA drops. Instead of talking to 20% of the leads, you're talking to 50% of the leads. Your closing rate stays about the same. Your CPA drops in half. That's the beauty of having something like a call verified lead that can really help you get in front of more seniors to talk about MedSups. So obviously lots of different internet leads out there. There's, you know, pay per click. So you could be doing stuff through Google, sending traffic to a landing page, versus like an internet lead that is through social media. Obviously, an organic internet lead through your own website, that's essentially a referral, in my opinion. So that's going to be low cost, especially if it's organic traffic, right? You know, that you shared your link on your own social media pages. A senior finds it, gets to your site. You know, they share their information. They've read about you. They think you've got what it takes to help them out. You call them up. They're like, oh, hey, Glenn, I was expecting you to call. You know, that's an incredible lead. That's a referral type lead. So referrals is one of the next leads that, again, I already kind of touched on earlier. Honestly, one of the best lead types out there. You know, you get a free referral from, it could be an existing client, it could be friend or family member. It could be, a business that you're working with. Maybe you've got a financial advisor that doesn't do Medicare. And anytime they come across someone who needs help with Medicare, they're referring it out to you. Now you have something that's essentially free, high trust, because it's coming from a different center of influence, someone who said, hey, you should talk to Glen. Then when that senior shows up, there's high trust, low cost. It's one of the best things you can do. So I'm a huge fan of setting up referral partners. Christian and I have done an entire episode on it. So feel free to search the Seven Figures or Bust podcast channel. If you go to YouTube, you can find our episode about setting up referral partners. I think it's a great opportunity. It's just not something that's scalable or fast. It usually takes years. At ESI, our internal agency, will probably write 500 plus clients on just referrals that are coming in, the phone ringing, and that's happening every year. And it's fantastic. We love that. We love when our phone rings or someone goes through our website and they submit their information, but setting up those types of referral channels can take years. So if you're trying to grow now and you have capital, paid marketing is 100% the way to go. Find a way to spend marketing dollars and generate clients today and set up those referral partners for down the road, and you'll see that continue to grow year over year. So the last one here, so we've talked about internet referrals, direct mail, call verified, cold calling, door knocking. The last one, the seventh one, is seminar marketing. Again, this is something we do at ESI, something that I've done personally many times. So I'm very familiar with seminar marketing, and it can work really well. It can build a lot of trust, right? You get an audience to show up. Maybe you're feeding them dinner or dessert or lunch or breakfast. They listen to you present. They see that you're an expert. Afterwards, you get permission to contact filled out. You can set up appointments after that, get a scope of appointment, etc. So high trust, for sure. This is going to be a very high trust generated lead. The problem with seminars is the costs can also be very high. Not always. There's different ways you can do it where you can be creative to try to save on costs. But I know one of the seminars that I personally was involved in as an agent many years ago, I remember the agency I was with at the time, they were telling me they spent around $15,000 on the seminar. It was a dinner seminar. And so obviously to recoup that money and to get an ROI on that money, you have to see a fair amount of sales come back through to make that 15,000 make sense. So the cost is high, the trust is high, but the other problem is your time can also be high. Depending on, you plan ahead for these seminars, right? You're sending out mail, you're doing marketing to try to get people to the seminar. Then you're at the seminar, you're presenting at the seminar. And then a lot of times you're not even selling at the seminar. You have to do that after the fact. So it can be a very long sales process. I like it as something that, again, integrated into your marketing portfolio. I think there's a place for it, but I don't think it's something that you necessarily want to go all in on. Again, every agent, so again, that was the seventh. So this all came from my book, How to Qualify, Present, and Sell, Final Expense of Medicare Supplements to Seniors. You can download this for free if you have Kindle until midnight on Friday, October 17th. In honor of Medicare Supplement Awareness Month, I'm hooking you guys up. You can download this book for free.